Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Collections. Today's video should be a pretty simple one, but it should be kind of a fun one. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this little guy right here. What is this? Well, this is a replacement rubber boot that I got from Atari Repair Parts, and I'm going to show you the process I go through today to install it into a 5200 controller. Now you might be asking yourself, why do we even care about replacement boots for the Atari 5200 controller? Well, as you know, the 5200 controller doesn't really self-center. And so what can happen is these little rubber boots were supposed to kind of help with that. They were supposed to help simulate and provide enough resistance equally on the controller to kind of help it self-center. But what happens is over time, the original rubber boots can sort of deform where the controller just kind of permanently sits in one place no matter what you do. And more importantly, they can start to tear, as you can see with this one over time. So, you know, the rubber boot is not 100% critical for the operation of the controller. I mean, you can still use a 5200 controller without the rubber boot even installed. But, you know, just cosmetically, it would just be nice if you could just, you know, replace it out and make it look better. So that's what we're going to go through today. So the first thing you're going to need to do in order to get to the rubber boot is you're going to have to remove the actual top of the controller's knob right up here, okay? Now I'm going to show you three methods that you can go through to do this. The hardest method is essentially brute force. What do I mean by that? Well, it would be essentially holding onto the controller with one hand and then grabbing the knob with the other and just and pull it off. And while that can be done, it requires a little more strength than I'm afraid my aging fingers are able to do these days. So let me show you option number two. Option number two would require you to use some needle nose pliers. Now, the way that I do this works pretty well. This is a good method for people that don't have the third method I'm going to show you, but here's how you would basically do it. So what you'd want to do is take your needle nose pliers and you'd want to push back on the rubber boot far enough that you can take the pliers and grab onto the metal shaft down below the boot. And the reason for that is because doing this will probably leave some marks on the shaft, and while it doesn't hurt it, just cosmetically, you want to try to hide this scarring as much as possible. The boot, when you put the new one in place, will cover over this area. So once you've got this in place, you're going to want to hold on tight with your hand, and then with your other hand, you're going to want to start to turn the knob back and forth as you pull it out towards you, and eventually it should come free, just like you saw there. So now let me show you method number three. Method number three for getting the knob off of the controller actually requires one of these. This is essentially a joystick knob puller for the 5200. And I also got this from AtariRepairParts.com. And the idea is that you wedge it between the boot and the top of the controller knob, like that. And then, by applying a downward force, you essentially pry the knob up and off of the shaft. Now, I will state that you can just do it just like this, but there is some risk to cracking or at least scarring up the plastic on the controller. So I do recommend getting like a piece of cardboard that you can sort of place under this just to help protect it. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start to push down as you're holding onto it to keep it straight, and the knob just comes right up and off. So those are the three methods for getting the knob off of there. Now at this point, you could go ahead and forcibly start to pry in here and start to pull the old boot loose, but it is actually still held in place by a thin plastic retention ring that snaps in around the base of the controller. So in order to really get this free with as little damage as possible, you're going to have to take the controller apart. So let me go ahead and go through that really quick. To take the controller apart, you've just got three screws along the bottom, right up here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these three right now. Now that I've got those three screws removed, I can start to take the controller apart. Now you're going to have to be careful with the way you do this. And I will recommend that if you have access to something, that you get something like a plastic spudger. And that's because what you're going to find is that there are some securing posts that kind of snap into place that hold the controller halves together. And it's easier to separate them if you can use something like a plastic spudger to help pry up on this. Additionally, there's also a part of a flex circuit that goes underneath the start, pause, and reset buttons. So when you go to take this apart, you'll also notice that it's going to give you some resistance because part of that flex circuit is under these buttons, and when you go to remove it, it's going to have to carefully slide out from underneath. But let me just go ahead and use this plastic spudger here to just sort of wedge up on the corner on the back side here. Okay, that helps with that. And now I should be able to lift the rest of this off of there. Now again, I have to be careful because there's a flex circuit underneath. There we go. Now the whole controller at this point is going to pretty much just come apart, and that's okay. You can set these pieces off to the side, and then here you can see the flex circuit that was in between the buttons here. Now when I go to put this all back together, I'm going to need to take this off, but it's easier to do with less risk of damage if you go ahead and do it from the inside. Alright, I don't need any more of this controller for right now, so I'm just going to set it off to the side. We just need to focus our attention to the top. Now again, there is a retention ring that holds this in place that I need to remove. And the easiest way to do that is to do it from the inside here. Because if you take a careful look here, you will notice that there are some spots, some indentations on the inside here. And that's because that is where that retention ring snaps into place. So using something like a thin screwdriver, I'm going to use something like this one here with this small flat blade. Just kind of push down and in a little bit, and you'll eventually get one side of the ring to pop up like I did here. And then just keep working your way around. There we go. Ring just popped out. I'm going to set that off to the side, and now the rubber boot can be completely removed. And again, this one's pretty torn up and messed up. So I'm just going to toss that because I don't need it. Now while I have the controller like this, I'm going to go ahead and remove the top bezels buttons here for start, pause, and reset. And again, in a very similar fashion, I'm just going to use like the flat blade of a small screwdriver here, and I'm going to very carefully, there's some little notches on the side of this as well, and I'm just going to push down like that. Now at this point I can set this off to the side, and now we can go ahead and put the new boot on. So all I got to do is just take the new boot like this, just set it down into place, and I'm going to use something fairly soft and non-destructive to kind of push down around the edge. So again, I can just use my spudger for this. And I'm just going around the sides of it just to make sure it's fully seated. And then I'm going to take that plastic retention ring and I'm going to line it up. So I'm just going to start with just one side here. Now it's hard to see in the camera, and I do apologize for that, but when you're looking down at this, you will see the slots that the ring snaps into along the sides. And the ring is also tapered. So you'll find out it's not exactly 100% flat, and what you're going to want is you're going to want the part that opens up and is wider at the top to be facing upwards. So you want the skinnier portion to be facing down. It'll make sense whenever you've got it in your hand. So I'm just going to go ahead and line this up, and I'm just going to start by kind of getting one side put into place, and then I'm just going to work my way around the edge to get the rest of the ring pushed in and locked into place, just like that. And that's it. We've got the new boot installed. Now I just have to reassemble the controller. Starting with the bottom part here, again we have the controller in a couple of different pieces. So let me show you how these plates go in. First you're going to start with the bottom plate. It's usually black in color, and it's going to fit in right here. Now this is the one that controls the potentiometer for left and right. And then the white one here goes up above that. And you're going to want to set it up kind of like you see here. Again, it's off-centered. And that's because these will match up with the actual potentiometer arms on the controllers. Then what I'm going to do is there is a shim that fits in the middle of this. And again, it's really only going to fit one way. And then you're going to take the rest of the shaft from the controller here, and you're going to put it like this. And I'm just kind of holding on to it on this side. And that's how the controller goes back together. Then we got to get the top knob put back on. And this is just a matter of just using some brute force. So again, just take the knob, put it onto the shaft like this, and just put the controller onto a hard surface and just push straight down like that until it stops. So now we can put the controller back together. First, you're going to want to make sure that your keypad membrane is lined up, and it does have a couple little guideposts to help it out with some holes here. So I'm just going to match that up. And then the real important part is on the potentiometer arms themselves. You're going to want to make sure that you have those arms situated exactly like you see here. Basically, you want them to be in the exact 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock positions. So with them set up like that, I'm now going to take the controller and I'm just going to kind of hold it in my hand like this just to kind of keep it centered as much as I can, and also apply some pressure to make sure it doesn't move too much. Or I'm going to get that flex circuit put right back in through the side slot there, and then start to push this down. And it looks like my keypad's a little off, so I'm going to just kind of wiggle that up a little bit. There we go. And then just press the controller back together, and there we go. We have full movement. So everything's good to go there, and I'm ready to put the buttons back on the top. So just arrange them where they need to go. Start, pause, reset. And there we go. And then from here I can go ahead and screw it all back together. And there we are. This controller now has a new boot, which helps it to kind of self-center a little bit. It's not perfect, but you know, still it's better than the one I had that was obviously torn. And so it looks better and should operate better as well. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for hanging out, and hopefully this was helpful to you. I'll catch you guys next time.